Good evening, everyone. Professor York here. Recap on the MVP presentation we did today. I wanted to hit on two issues in terms of helping you better understand what a minimum viable product is, and also to put some perspective on the assignments that are coming forward so that you can be successful with your MVP presentation as well as your final presentation. So, what is a MVP? No, it is not a most valuable player. Okay, what it is what we call a minimum viable product. And as I talked about in class, I think one of the best examples is if you were a baker and you were trying to sell wedding cakes, you're not going to have the flour that is there. You're actually, and the best example that baker does is they do sampling of cupcakes. So it's the smallest solution that enables you to test your assumptions, and that it's a small solution that customers can derive value. The customers can derive value, but that delivers the value to the customer. So what we mean by that is, as we talked about the wedding cake example, if you just put flour in, that's not going to do the job. Or you have a car and you just have tires. But if you can work across this matrix of considerations, feasible, valuable, usable, and delightful, that's what a minimum viable product is. So as we talked about in terms of the wedding cake, in terms of the sequential versus the what we call the MVP approach, you see that the cupcake really allows you to cross all these key attributes so that you know what the most basic is, so that what you can do is then you can improve upon the product based on feedback in terms of maybe a basic cake to a wedding cake that's there. So why do we do this? One is, if we look at the diffusion of innovation curve, I think we had one of our guest speakers who talked on this. Chuck Templeton had talked about diffusion of innovation and getting what we call those innovators or early evangelists and adopters in, okay, in the early phase, because they're going to want to play with your MVP and your product, and they're going to give you feedback. So what it's great about is they give you the feedback, and you can avoid building products that nobody wants, which is number one reason why businesses fail. And you can maximize learning, and this is what you're doing. You're running experiments because you want to maximize learning per dollar spent. And then you want to really understand, if you're satisfying a real need. And that's, you're going to be testing a value hypothesis or growth hypothesis. And you'll hear the term in many ways, hacking. And this is what hacking is, per Sean Ellis, who was a multi-serial entrepreneur, worked with several different startups, including Dropbox. And he wrote the great book, Hacking for Growth, which is running experiments to test these hypotheses or these guesses that you have basically on your business model canvas. So MVP tying in with prototyping. And I think that there's a major advantage in terms of the MVP approach. Successful prototyping will provide answers to your key assumptions, and it will help you make this loop as short as possible. In other words, you will, by doing simple, you're going to be able to build, measure, learn, as we'll talk about, but you can run those cycles shorter, you can learn, and as a result, you can increase the number of cycles of learning so that you maximize your learning during over a certain time period. Okay, and as I mentioned about the build, measure, learn that we talked about previously, that Eric Rice, who has written the book about basically lean startup, and he's the emoji. If you remember the startup about emojis, that was his business. It's we've got an idea. Let's build the most basic. Let's measure the response by running an experiment, and then let's learn from what the responses we have to see whether we have product market fit or if we need to improve on things. So in many ways, it can help really get a concept to a minimum product in a very short time period. And here the example we look at is 3D printed prototype, which in essence you can get in a few days versus if you look at hard tool version, and we talked to several of the mechanical engineers, that could take 6 weeks to get the right version. And as you can see, the difference in cost and in a completed product, maybe with a 3D printed prototype, you're not 100% there, whereas the initial hard tool version, you're closer there. But from a testing standpoint, you now can go and you can test your data 10 times faster and run 30 times more number tests for the comparable cost, which is what you're trying to do, because even if you have this hard tool version, it's not perfect and you're going to have to learn from that. So the question is, when you're a startup and you're tight with money, is what would you much rather do in spending in terms of money? If I have $500 and I can get some data and tell me if I'm on the right track or not, I'd much rather have that feedback so I make sure I can course correct quickly and make something that my clients or my customers want. So some examples. Physical, okay? It can be like we look at with automobiles, it could be a clay, or it could be foam boards, or we see like with architects how they create a model before they go into a building. So that's one way of doing. You could have a back of the napkin. Physical, again, chocolate. We talked about the cupcake as well. Web, Dropbox. Dropbox is fantastic because it really was initially a landing page with a little functionality once you had, actually they ran an explainer video once you hit learn more. You can measure. What's the beautiful thing about digital web is you can build in analytics by embedding code into the pages, the web pages, either Google Analytics, or you could use pixels from Facebook to be able to identify what's being picked up, etc. And with some of the analytics that are there, you can actually be able to tell how much somebody spends on watching a video. You can even have, in terms of tracking mechanisms now with analytics, in terms of how somebody's mouse goes over and where they go over on a web page. So having the basic web interface is something that I've had with multiple teams from several different classes, and I think I provided out an example for a software company that was doing scheduling. I think it was called Shark Schedule, that I put up as an example for you guys. But basically, like Dropbox, it's a landing page. And here's a great landing page. And the key thing about a landing page with you have here, one is you have what we call a hero image in this face. But what is most important is this learn more, which is to help us be able to determine what, if you're going to take action, we can measure that action and we can see is that action something based on the MVP that you see here, and you want to find out if you have uptake. Okay, another way you can do it is wireframe. So this comes from actually one of my first classes where we use basically wireframes. This is like from the first exercise that we all had done in this class, which was that point of pain. That was, think about the pain and let's talk about the team, let's draw it out. Well, one of the teams did this, and then what they did was they put it out there and they got feedback by doing interviews. So you can use a wireframe. There's actually software another team had done where they had a software where you could design a wireframe and then you can have interviews, and where actually potential customers in your target segment or target frame could actually play with the wireframe and manipulate it so that they get to where they're at. But it tells you whether that you have uptake with your basic concept and then what modifications would make it even more attractive. And then again, you have videos. The classic we see is with Kickstarter in terms of having videos. You see, with YouTube, you can see how many followers you have to your concept to see whether you have traction that's there. With Kickstarter, what's great is we're talking about Kickstarter, Indiegogo. You're setting an experiment out there with a basic description of your business and maybe your MVP. You may not even have a full built product, but here you can be able to set based off your funding goals to see whether with a threshold of, say, maybe $25,000, whether you could pick up $25,000 of pre-orders that are there. Zappos is another example where they did this with a landing page, actually. And what they did is they did not have the warehouse in shoes, but based on what they were offering and the examples that were there, what Tony Hsieh did was then he went out and he went to shoe stores to fulfill the orders. So, having videos, having landing pages are very, very simple ways to be able to get pickup. I had another team that I'll talk about that used basic simple sheet that they posted in real estate offices describing the basic service and idea and had a QR code that went to a survey. Then you have storyboards, which I use a lot in doing PowerPoints and doing web pages, etc., where you can lay it out and you can ask for feedback or see whether your basic storyboard is something that would gain some traction. So what I've tried to do is give you some examples and for what a minimum viable product could be to get you thinking about what your MVP is, because you're going to need to have two of them in your presentation. And what you want to do with your MVP is your goal is when you start testing is you want to get a measurable response. And that's what's beautiful about digital. So some ways you can do that is vis-a-vis landing pages, as we talked about, AdWord testing, which is basically in terms of you got the right keywords or keyword, what we call AdWord groups, with a keyword strategy to find out if we're using the right thing. Are we coming up on page 1 when we do certain type of search? You can also do what we call A/B split testing, where you can have two versions of copy or of a landing page to see what takes traction. You could even do it with your two MVPs, as I do think Shark Schedule did. You could do, as we talked about Dropbox, the explainer video. And then we talked about Kickstarter or Indiegogo in terms of setting goals and having a video and seeing if you can reach your funding goals. So what are some metrics that matter? One is engagement. So clicks, likes, comments, signups, great. Call to action response is very critical, especially on a website. This gets you into the beginning of the funnel, okay? And we talked about that marketing funnel, about tension. But what you want to see is how deep they go within your website. And there are ways by embedding Google Analytics or other types of analytics. You can have your pixels from Facebook, etc., that can allow you to be able to measure time at other pages as well as other call to actions. So you're seeing how deep or how more engaged they are in from the attention to the interest to the decision point to the point of where they want to sign up. And that's where you have CTAs. That'll be, would you want to sign up for a newsletter? Would you like to be able to sign up for the service, or shopping cart? Sentiment, and this is the classic is with Facebook with likes, but you're trying to pick up in terms of positive, negative, or neutral, and in a qualitative or quantitative manner. So Facebook is one, but Quora has this in terms of how people respond, not just in terms of the discussion that goes on, but also in terms of the vote ups and vote downs of a particular posting that's there. And then last but not least, which is the end of the funnel, which is the commitment or the willingness to buy. So there is a flip side, okay, with an MVP. You're not going to build a basic airplane that you're going to fly people. Just there's safety issues. You're not going to build, you're not going to put out a pharmaceutical that hasn't been properly tested. And there are arguments on the flip side that maybe it's faster just to build the full product and do all the iteration. And you do have the potential for false negatives. And then there's the visionary complex, as we talked about previously. Steve Jobs, customers don't know what they want. Okay, these are really, really, ultra creative businesses that you tend to see where you have that visionary complex. So there is that other side, and there are some arguments in terms of some type of businesses that may be more suitable to a more fully developed product. E.g., I don't think I would want to fly on a paper airplane, but guess what? The Wright brothers put together something that was pretty rudimentary by today's standards. We were able to get flight, and they found proof of concept. Okay, now today we probably wouldn't jump on anything like that. We would want to be on a fully tested, validated, and regulated airplane that is by a commercial airline. This is the flow for MVP1, the first MVP present, which is coming up in a few weeks. Can you believe it? The quarter's going to be over before you know it. So the flow is you're going to have key assumptions to the business. You're going to connect the value proposition to the customer requirements. So you're going to have a table. You're going to define things that you want to get a measurable response to validate your MVP. So a few data points and developing the MVP to test these. You'll have 2 prototypes, and then you're going to tell me how the MVP ties into your business model canvas. You know, what current features deliver value and solve the problem for the customer, which is the value proposition. And then, as I talked about previously, is the key risks. I want to know technical, financial, legal, and customer-wise, and then how you'll test the MVP. And these are covered in, and I put together and put, it is on PolyLearn, what I call a quick cheat sheet. This is the basis that you will be following to put together your presentation, and you can use the tables that are within here as well. And I will touch on these tables as we move along. So this is also the rubric, so you know what we will be scoring against. So as you can see, in terms of the key assumptions, the connecting the value proposition customer requirements, the minimum viable products, the risks, which we talked about, legal and technical, financial, they're going to be the MVP versus BMC, the testing plan, which don't forget, it's testing out in the community for uptake, not in terms of functionality testing, as I had one team do actually in the springtime. Your quality of presentation, is it on time, and would I invest, which is a discretionary score that I use, but I think it's very important because I want to know at the end of the day, is this something that if I sat there and got excited that I would want to actually put some money against. And this is your proof and pudding that you guys need to be thinking about when you're going out and pitching your businesses, because this is what you want investors to be excited enough that they're going to write checks, and not, we're talking, you know, here's a buck to do this, but, you know, $50,000, $100,000 is nice. That's what's going to help move the bar there. Okay, and then I did throw some bonus points for questions and anything that I think is outstanding that's there, but this gives you a sense of what we'll be shooting for in the rubric. And what I want you to think about is, and I took this slide actually from a project I did at UC Berkeley with a team. It was actually an international team. I had someone from China, someone from Taiwan, and somebody from Chile, where we looked at entrepreneurs and the needs of immigrant entrepreneurs, and we segmented the data based on 2 archetypes: one is business background versus non-business background, and the jobs to do. So this is very important when you take your goobs, that you need to translate it to a job to do, and that once you have the job to do, then you're going to translate it, you know, and you're going to look at and build out those what I call key pieces that are going to build the basis of your features that are there in terms of customer requirements. So these then you integrate into your MVP suggestions, and as you can see here, you take that what we've just presented on this the bar chart. Those are going to be your customer requirements. You tie back to your value proposition, which you have on your business model canvas. So ultimately, you're going to take your customer requirements, and as long as you've aligned them to your what we call value proposition, and in this case, what we did was we just used wireframes to do for testing, but you may come up with another alternative that's there, and this is just wireframes per the particular archetype that was there. And then testing. This is running an experiment. This is critical. This is going to make the difference between whether you get an A or a B in this class. I know everybody's doing really well, but the ability to run very effective tests, and basically, I hate to say there's a term called hacking. You're going to basically run an experiment. and you're going to have defined question or objectives. You're going to have who are you going to test. So what is your sample frame? What is the archetype? So for instance, with Team 2, dealing with young people who want to get in shape, you're probably going to want to hang out by maybe a gym, or maybe do some testing of your idea in front of a health food store or something like that. You will then put, how will you test? Okay, will it be, for instance, I just put up a flyer which has a QR code? Will I do a landing page? Will I do where I interview people at a Starbucks and I have multiple iterations and I'm just going to go through line and I'll buy people a free Frappuccino? And then how are you going to measure? And this is critical. What is your threshold? So like when we think about Kickstarter, you have a threshold for success and whether you hit it or not. So you're going to have to set a goal. But there may be other metrics that you may want to have. And then how are you going to analyze your data? Because that's going to be very important in your presentation, in your final presentation. So testing methods, here's an example, and you could do something with a QR code that kicks out into a survey that is there, or a link that does, following an introduction from a landing page. And what you can then do is that you can have several key questions that could be done in SurveyMonkey, or you can do it in Google as well. And this MVP data will be part of the final presentation, and what you want to do is reiterate your methods and your results, your learnings, and what changes that you make to your minimum viable product, and what changes that you make to your business model canvas, and what steps that you have. So those are some things that you should think about. And at the end of the day is, with the data that you have from your results, you will share with us in the final presentation what worked. Okay, where did you get uptake? Where do you have product market fit? And ultimately, if you have to modify, remember, if you're dealing with those early adopters, those innovators, they are going to come back and they're going to want to tweak it and find out, if it wasn't fully successful, it wasn't fully meeting, but they like things, then what are the priority features that need to be tweaked? Okay, and if you didn't get a lot of interest, what else do you need to change to get there? And so these are things that you need to be thinking about as you do your testing. So anyway, I do believe that is it for this video. I tried to keep it pretty concise, but it's a good reiteration that I think will be very helpful for you to go back to as you get prepared for doing the MVP presentation, which will be again on March 7th. And then as you get some insights to the final presentation, because what you do with your MVP and also your MVP testing will play out in terms of your final experience that you're going to reiterate in terms of your journey, in terms of how you ended your journey, in terms of your test and what you learned, and how you apply it both to your minimum viable product but also to your business model. So hopefully that helps you out. I've tried to do this under 25 minutes. If you have questions, feel free as always to reach out. I'm here to help you be successful.